Okay, so quadratic equation. First, I would like to give you a little bit introduction on quadratic equation. What is the quadratic equation? Quadratic equation is you have a equation like second degree of the square, okay, second power square. For example, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. This is a standard form of quadratic equation. Let me turn off the light. This is a standard form of a quadratic equation. And also we need to require that a not equal 0. You may ask me a question. So what if a equals 0? If a equals 0, then this is just the first linear equation. It's not a quadratic equation anymore, okay? You may have sometimes b equals 0, that's fine. For example, if you have 3x squared plus 6 equals 0, this is the quadratic equation. Even we don't have the second term immediately 0. Or sometimes you just have 3x squared plus 5x, you don't have c equals 0. This is the quadratic equation. You have the quadratic form here. And also sometimes you may have 3x squared plus 5x equals 3x plus 2. Well, this is the quadratic equation because as long as the second quadratic form square, the coefficient is not 0, it's a quadratic equation. Okay? And well, you can see what's the difference between this one and this one is that right hand side is not 0. Okay, before you solve the quadratic equation, you always want to make sure the right hand side is 0. Okay, so 3x squared plus 5x minus 3x minus 2 equals 0. You will have 3x squared plus 2x minus 2 equals 0. Then you have a standard form of quadratic equation. Okay. Oh, I should say that you do not always have to do that. But before you are very familiar with the quadratic equation, it's better to do this way and use quadratic formula. Okay. So after you read the textbook, you probably know the quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Okay, this is the quadratic formula. You must memorize. Okay, if there is something you need to put on your formula card for the exam 1, this should be the one for sure. Okay, there will probably be other things. This should be one for sure if you don't memorize the quadratic. If you don't memorize it, well, there are a lot of equations in all kinds of forms. It doesn't matter whatever form it is. Okay, as long as you put the equation like this way, then you can use the formula. Okay, for example, let's just look at the simple one. For example, first one, you can see. I probably will not explain all of them. Just pick several problems and you use the formula to finish that. Okay. Again, this formula is really important. You have to make sure you memorize it. In the future classes, if you have more math classes, for example, calculus, well, you have to memorize all of these formulas. Okay, so even, for example, x squared equals 70, even you have x squared plus, what is that? 73, right? I just use another one. 23 equals 0. If I have this one. Well, this is one way you can solve that. You can see probably you can do if x squared equals, subtract both sides by 23. So it's negative 23. And x equals positive and negative square root of negative 23. As in the previous class, we have said that square root of a negative number is complex number. So the answer is just a positive and negative square root of 23i. Okay. This is if you are familiar with the quadratic equation, you can solve this way. Some students probably say, oh, I don't really know you can do that. But it's okay. You still can use the formula. As I said, this formula solves all quadratic equations. Even this one. All quadratic, 20 questions of them, you can use this formula. Although sometimes you use the formula, it's very time consuming sometimes if you know easy ways to do that for or factor. If you don't know how to do that, you can use the formula for sure. So if you use this formula, how to do this? This is the first way, okay? If you use the formula, you see x squared plus 23 equals 0. So from here, a equals 1, b equals 0, c equals 23, right? For this one, a equals 1, there's no b, b equals 0, c equals 23. And then plug into the formula, so x equals 2 times a, so 2 times 1. And negative b, so b is 0, so it's just 0. Plus or minus square root of b squared, so 0 squared, so 0, minus 4 times a times c. A is 1, 4 times 1, times c is 23. So the answer is x equals 2 positive and negative. 0 plus goes away 0, plus or minus square root of negative 4 times 23. Well, negative 4 you can square root of 4 is 2, you know that. So it's going to be x equals 2. Well, I should choose a better place on negative side. Plus or minus 2 squared over 23i, because negative 4 you can take it out as 2i, and 2 cancel out. You are going to have exactly the same thing. Okay? If you use the formula, you get exactly the same thing of square root of 23i. So the question here is positive negative square root of 73i. You know that, okay? So you can always use the quadratic formula for any quadratic formula. Okay? So quadratic equation. Let's look at another one of your homework. Okay. So you can use quadratic formula for that one. You can use quadratic formula for that one. But you don't have to. You can take just positive negative square root of square root of negative 125. And you have to simplify 125 into 5 squared multiplied by 5 and factor it out. Okay, this one. V squared minus 7v plus 12 equals 0. It says solve the equation by 0 factor properly. I'll give you another example, not this one, okay? So you can do, for example, x squared minus 2x minus 3 equals 0. You can factor it. If you remember that factoring, you can factor cross multiply. Factor the first one as x times x. Factor the last one as negative 3 and positive 1. Cross multiply. Negative 3, check here, negative 3x plus 1x equals negative 2x, which is the middle term, and that's right. Then my factoring is going to be, this is my first factor, this is my second factor. So it's going to be x minus 3, x plus 1 equals 0, and here I got x equals positive 3. Well, I forgot to say something about that. But here you can set up x minus 3 equals 0, x plus 1 equals 0. 0 factor, if this is 0, the equation is true. If this is 0, the equation is true. So x equals 3 and x equals negative 1. Okay, so this is solved by factoring it. Oh, sometimes you say, oh, Professor, I forgot I don't know how to factor this. Just I just don't have that feeling to factor this. I don't know how to factor. It's fine. You can use quadratic formula. What I said, you can always use the quadratic formula to solve any quadratic equation. Okay, in this form. X squared, any quadratic form, if it's not this form, you change that into this form. So x equals, so here you got a equals 1, b equals negative 2, c equals negative 3 for this one. Okay, use the formula. X equals 2 times a is 2 times 1. Negative b, so it's negative, b is negative 2, continue again, plus or minus square root of b squared is negative 2 squared, minus 4 times a is 1, c is negative 3, and you simplify that. So x equals 2, positive 2 plus or minus 4 minus 4, 12, plus negative 4 plus 12, which is square root of 16, which is 4. Okay, square root of 16 is 4. Then you simplify that. 2 plus 4 equals 6 over 2, 3. 2 minus 4, negative 2 over 2, negative 1. You see? You have exactly the same answer as I have here, factoring. So, even you don't know how to use the factoring, if you don't know, forget how to factor it. Sometimes it's not easy to factor it, and you still can use the quadratic formula as well. You can factor that one, or you can use the quadratic formula. Okay, so this is a little bit different. It says find all solutions by factoring. Well, if it says by factoring, for sure you can factor it. But if you forgot factoring it, you can do a quadratic formula. Okay, that's a little bit different for this one. Because the equation is not a standard form. What you need to do, you need to change that equation to standard form first. So 3r squared minus 22r equals 16. Okay. So now you have your quadratic equation is like this. Is it a standard form? No. The standard form is like this. The right equation has to be 0. So you have to subtract both sides from 16 and make sure the right hand side is 0. So you got 3r squared minus 22r minus 16 equals 0. Now you can use the formula. A equals 3, B equals negative 22, C equals negative 16. Okay? So you can use A equals 3, B equals negative 22, C equals negative 16, plug into the formula and use a calculator and find a solution. Or factor is much easier sometimes. So you can do factor the first one, r times r. 3r times r give you 3r squared. Factor the last one, negative 8 and 2, positive 2. Okay? So positive 2 times negative 8 give you negative 16. Cross multiply. 3r times negative 8 is negative 24. 2 times r is plus 2r, which is negative 22r. Well, this is the middle one, which means my factoring is right. Sometimes you have to try it. Try another one. Like if it is not working, if it's not negative 22, you cross multiply, add them together. If it's not negative 22, you have to check it. You try another different combination. Then you have this right. So my factor is 3r plus 2, r minus 8 equals 0. From here I can solve 3r plus 2 equals 0, so r equals negative 2 over 3. So r minus 8 equals 0, so r equals 8. Okay, this is how you solve this equation. Again, if you don't know how to use the factoring method, you can use the formula. Okay, once you change it into standard form, you can always use the formula to solve any quadratic equation. You can use a square root, or you can fact x plus 6, x minus 6, or you can use quadratic formula. Either way, you can find that easily. You can fact it. It's a complete square. 4x minus 1 squared. X equals 1/4. Or you can use quadratic formula, or you can factor it. Okay, so you can say this one is already a square form. So a square equals a number. Well, anytime you have a complete square, just take a square root and you solve it. Okay, so anytime you have a square root, for example, if you have something, for example, x squared equals 16, can you use the formula? Yes. It probably more time consuming. But as long as it's complete square, you just want to get rid of the square root. Take both sides square root, and the square goes away, but this one has a square root. Remember, it's square formula. It's a quadratic formula. Always have two roots. There's plus or minus 16. Okay. Well, if it's not this one, you can change another one. For example, x plus 1 squared equals negative 5. Is this square perfect square? There's a constant number here. You still can do that. X plus 1 equals, get rid of the square by square root. Plus or minus square root of negative 5. Square root of negative 5 is not a problem at all now, because we just learned that complex numbers. So it's plus or minus square root of 5i. And then x subtract 1 from both sides is negative 1. Subtract 1 from both sides, so it's negative 1. You can shift to positive 1 to the other side is negative 1. So it's equal sign here. You put it on the right hand side of the equal sign is negative 1. or you subtract 1 here, subtract 1 here, it's the same idea. So it's -1 plus or minus square root of 5i. Okay? If it's a square form, you can do this way. You can also do quadratic formula way, but it's going to be it's more time consuming. You still can make it right, but it's more time consuming. Okay? Okay, so even it says by completing the square, you do not really need to complete the square, but you can use factoring, you can use quadratic formula, as long as you can solve it out, that's okay. I'm not that picky. When you do your test, it says completing by square, well you can see, oh, as long as you get the right answer, the test really don't know how to do that, right? So now, but I still want to show you how to do the completing square form. For example, x squared plus 6x minus 7 equals 0. You know you can factor. You know you can use a quadratic formula. Now I'm going to introduce a completing square form. How do you do that? So you can do x squared plus 6x. You need a complete square. You need a square, so you have to add something and then add something here to make a complete square. So this is x squared, this is 6x. If the first coefficient is 1, so the middle one divided by 2, then square. So it's going to be 3 squared. Once you plus the 3 squared, you have to minus 3 squared. You don't want to change anything. Compare with this one. Compare with this equation, you add 3 squared because the middle is the number is 6. Okay. After plus 3 squared, you have to subtract 3 squared because you don't want to change the whole equation. This part actually is 0. I didn't change the equation. I just add something plus minus something. It's still 0 here. So it's still the previous equation. However, I can use this 3 as a completed square form. So basically, I will have x plus 3 square, and then this 2 will be a number. It's minus 16 equals 0. And then you can do x plus 3 square equals 16, and then you take a square root on both sides. So x plus 3 equals plus or minus square root of 16. So x plus 3 equals plus or minus 4. And then x, you subtract 3 from both sides. So x equals 1. 4 minus 3 equals 1. And negative 4 minus 3 equals negative 7. Okay, so that's how you do it by completing square. You can do factored. You can use quadratic formula. A equals 1, B equals 6, C equals negative 7. You can use that to solve that as well. Okay. So solve by completing square. You can use completing square, quadratic formula. Sometimes you cannot factor it if it's not a if the determinant is not a square. Okay. So you can solve that by either method is okay. Okay. Solve the equation with quadratic formula. It's not a standard form. You have to change that into standard form. For example, x squared equals 2x minus 26. It's not a good standard form. You have to change that. So x squared, shift that everything on the right to the left. Change the sign. So plus 2x to the other side, so it's negative 2x. Minus 26 to the left side, it's plus 26. And equals 0. Now from here to here, now this is a standard form. You have A, you have B, you have C. You can use a form. You can use a formula, sorry. Okay. This is a little bit different. You have to multiply everything by 21 because you have a rational equation, right? 21 times 7, 21 times 21, get rid of 21. 21 times 1 is negative 21. So basically, you don't want any denominator here. So denominator is a really big problem. But if you multiply every single term, multiply 21 here, 21 here, 21 here, and 21 multiplied by 0 is 0. So you don't have any denominator anymore. Okay. Just example. If I have 15x squared minus 1 over 10x plus minus 1 equals 0. For example, this one, not that one. So you multiply everything by 10, you got 2x squared. You multiply this by 10, 10 cancel out, just minus x. Multiply this by 10 is just minus 10. So then you have ABC, use the quadratic formula again. Plug in. Okay, so number 16, Okay, so this one is not a standard form for sure, and this one is not a polynomial function. You need to FOIL it out. Okay, you need to FOIL it out. Just take this one as example. X minus 4, x minus 8 equals negative 4. X minus 4, x minus 8 equals negative 4. It is a quadratic equation because we have square, but it's not a standard form. I need to change this into standard form. So first, there is a negative 4 on the right hand side. I don't want that, but I need to shift that to the left side. Well, then there is a quadratic equation here. Is not a polynomial form, not adding together. It's multiplication of two factors. So I need to multiply them out. FOIL it. Front x squared out minus 8x, inside minus 4x, last plus 32, and equals negative 4. Then I can shift the left to 4 in the left side. So it's x squared minus 8 minus 4 minus 12x plus 32 plus negative 4 is left side is positive 4. So I have x squared minus 12x plus 36 equals 0. You can use the quadratic formula, but I can do it easier way because this is a completely square, so you can factor it out as x minus 6 equals 0, and x equals 6. Normally, for both of them, it's x equals 6. Normally, for a quadratic equation, you want to try factoring first because factoring is much quicker, okay, than the formula. Formula is it requires very careful calculation, but it is very sometimes you don't know how to factor. You have to use the quadratic formula. So it's 6. Okay. Okay, so this f equals amv squared over r. I want to do not exactly the same one, but I want to do a different one. Then you have an idea how to solve this one as well. Okay. For example, you have an equation like s equals 3x, well, just not x, 3r squared s, no, u v. Okay, so what you need to do, you want to solve is that if suppose it says solve for r. As I said, whatever you want to solve, in the previous class I told you, if you want to solve for r, you want to isolate r. So there's a bunch of things here besides r. So what I need to do, I need to get rid of them one by one. So first there's a v here, is a denominator. If it's a denominator, so I have to multiply both sides by v. So I got sv equals 3r squared u. Now I have 3 as a coefficient multiplication. I have a u as a multiplication. So I just need to divide both sides by 3, divide both sides by u, then r squared is isolated. So you got sv divided by 3 divided by u, then r squared will be isolated. Okay. Then once you isolate the r squared, you want to solve for r, you just get rid of the square. Okay. How do I get rid of a square? You just take a square root. So basically you're going to have r, you take a square root of r squared is r. Take the square root of this is square root of sv over 3u. Remember, this is a square. Okay? When you take a square root, you have positive, negative, you have two roots. Okay? That's how you solve this one. Okay, use discriminant. Use discriminant to find out what kind of solution you have. Basically, you look at this formula. Look at the quadratic formula. Look at the quadratic formula. The problem is that sometimes the square root b squared minus 4ac under the formula, under square root right here, under the square root, b squared minus 4ac. Okay, this is a problem. Sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative, sometimes it's 0. Okay, if this is positive, you're going to have two real roots. If it's 0, and the plus or minus 0, this whole part is gone, it's just one root. If it's negative, you know square root of negative is what? Complex numbers. So this one is going to be a complex number. So now, what is discriminant? For our equation, if it's not standard form, you have to change that into standard form. Then you'll use the discriminant to determine it. Discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. Okay? b squared minus 4ac. If it's positive, two real roots. If it's equal 0, one real roots, or two same roots, or it's one rational roots, right? It's two same, well, one is exactly the same meaning, but some people some problems say different way, okay? So one real roots or two same roots, negative, okay? A pair of conjugate complex. Let me see. It just say two complex roots, that's enough. But it is a pair of conjugate because it's a plus or minus, okay? A pair of conjugate complex roots. Or you just say two complex roots, that will be enough. Okay, now let's just look at example, this one. 8x squared plus 5x equals 8. 8x squared plus 5x equals 8. Is it a standard form? No, it's not. So I need to change that into standard form. So basically, I'll move everything to left side. F5. This is here is already on the left side of the equal sign. Don't change that. But 8 is on the right hand side of the equal sign. So I've shifted that to left side of the equal sign. So shift that is minus 8 equals 0. Now A, B, C is given. Use that formula. Discriminant. Okay, if there's second thing you want to write on your formula sheet, part of this one. Okay, so then you have A equals 8, B equals 5, C equals negative 8. Okay, so now we use the discriminant. D delta equals B squared minus 4AC. Okay, B squared is 25, plug in, minus 4 times 8 times negative 8. You use your calculator, you can find this is 25 minus is plus. 32 times 256. Okay, you can obviously tell this is positive because positive number is positive, and it has two real roots or two rational roots. Okay, two rational solutions. Wait. Two rational, one rational, two non-real complex solutions, two irrational, my bad. Two irrational roots. Oh, it actually says that. Well, you can tell what's the difference between irrational or rational. Irrational means if you take a square root, you got 25 plus 256, this actually equals 281. 281. Okay. 281 is positive, it's two real roots. But 281 is not a square form. You take a square root on this one, you're going to have a lot of decimals. It's irrational number. It's not a perfect square. If this is not a perfect square, you're going to have a square root, for example, square root of 5. It's not a perfect square, so it's going to be irrational. Okay. If you have a square root of 9, it's a perfect square, which is 3. Well, this is a rational number. So that's what it means. Okay. Wait. Yeah, two irrational roots. Okay. Oh, I have not said anything like that. I have to put it here. Okay, let me say again. So if you check that 281 is not a square, if it's not a perfect square. If it's not a perfect square, then it's an irrational number. Because you take a square root, okay? I say again. Square root of 5 is an irrational root because this one is not a perfect square. Square root of 9, this is a rational number because it's going to be an integer 3. Okay? So that's the discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. That's it. Okay, so use the discriminant to do that, and I think you should not have any problem to do that one. Find discriminant, and then if it's positive, it is equal to 0. If it's negative, so use that rule to determine it, to make the decision for the roots. Okay, now we're done with this section.